So, I don't know if you've heard the news, but y'all, the Warrior Factory is back. The Warrior Factory, that place where they take raw materials in the form of America's best and brightest young men and women and turn them into warfighters, soldiers, paratroopers, Green Berets. I'm talking about Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Fort Bragg, which for over 100 years was called Fort Bragg, and no one knew that there was a problem. But they all liked the name. If you served there, if you mobilized for war there, if you jumped out of airplanes or swung low over the treetops with the doors open or fired artillery on the range there, you just told folks you were stationed at Bragg. Where are you at? I'm stationed at Bragg. But a few years ago, in what had to have been one of the most awful and overplayed round of virtue signaling, Fort Bragg became Fort Liberty because someone on high felt that little bitty feelings might get hurt if anyone knew that Fort Bragg was named for a former Confederate general over a century ago. Now, to be honest, I have yet to meet any soldier, especially any old soldier, who likes the name change, right? Not one. Of all stripes and ranks, of all creeds and colors, I don't know a single soldier who spent time at Bragg who was offended by the name while they were there, or basically who liked the new name either. Not a single one of us ever cared about the name, but we, by God, cared when they took it away because it became like an insult. Stripping the name away was like being told that every one of us who had passed through the gates or jumped on the drop zones or cleaned latrines in the barracks were somehow complicit in some mass systemic racism. When they changed the name, they didn't just change the sign. They slapped every Fort Bragg veteran right in the face and told them to wise up and quit being a bunch of racist extremists. That's the way it felt. But, in one of those chess versus checkers moves, the long-standing home of the 82nd Airborne, the Special Warfare Center, Army Special Forces, Civil Affairs, and PSYOPs, Delta Force, and the Joint Special Operations Command, the home of warriors, it got its name back. In a classic end-around, the post is not named again for Confederate General Braxton Bragg. Nope, it's been brought back to the Bragg name, but now it's named for Roland Bragg. Really? Roland Bragg, a U.S. Army hero of World War II who earned the Silver Star at the Battle of the Bulge. And oh, by the way, he was a private. Now, why is this important? Why do we care? Well, for one, because it's about legacy. Millions of warfighters came through Bragg and they served ably. Every one of them has had to caveat their memories over the last few years with a hyphenated description of where they served. Yeah, I was at Bragg. Well, the one they call Liberty now. It's constant. So yeah, it's about legacy. Number two, it's a sign to the world that our military is actually not filled with those who whimper and simper and wring their hands about mean names that someone said could trigger their little bitty emotions. We are warfighters. We're stronger than our circumstances. Number three, let's be honest, Fort Liberty was a silly name. It sounded like somebody had a name the post contest at the local elementary school and a third grader won. So yeah, Fort Liberty, And number four, changing the name back to Bragg, it really shows that we have a leadership right now that could care less about virtue signaling. I mean, the extreme pleasure and the wry smile on Secretary Pete Hegseth's face as he signed the order is the same look that we want on every paratrooper's face when they stand in the door and put their knees to the breeze over Sicily drop zone. It's a swagger. It's like a get her done moment. It's the attitude of confident brashness that won wars for America, defeated enemies, deterred danger. And I tell you right now, the troops are going to love it. So whether it was an expeditionary fight or a battle here on U.S. soil, there have been generations of Americans who have given the full measure to ensure that the interests of others were protected above their own, and many of them went through Fort Bragg. And we should be far more resolute and state emphatically that we will never forget, nor will we allow our much vaunted military to become pawns in some social experimentation or virtue signaling. And me personally, I'll be honest with you, I feel like I've got some skin in the game. Like in the broad sense, and specifically as to those posts that have been renamed, including Fort Bragg. I feel like I can speak to the actual culture of the military. My grandfather entered the service here in Alabama at the onset of World War II. He served with distinction in the glider troops. He left home in 1942 and he came home 3 years later. He continued to serve through Korea and Vietnam. He retired after 3 decades as a general officer. Likewise, my father was a career Army officer who also entered the service right here in Alabama. My earliest memory of my dad is like a black and white movie almost. I was just like maybe 2 or 3 years old, and he arrived at the house earlier than expected from his first of 2 tours in Vietnam. He was highly decorated, multiple awards for valor in combat. My own returns from Afghanistan and Iraq, they were both relieving and they were joyous. They were memories I will cherish the rest of my life as I was reunited with my family. Detoxing from life in a combat zone, it can be trying, and for the longest time, I found myself scanning the rooftops while I drove around town and having the curious habit of carrying 5 things in my left hand but nothing in my right, like I still needed to keep my gun hand free. But I came home. My son, he entered the service nearly a decade ago, over a decade actually. I've had the honor of watching him become the next of 4 generations in a row to choose voluntarily to put on a uniform. It was with real pride that I actually pinned on his airborne wings when he completed jump school, and then again when I administered his oath to join the ranks of the commissioned Army. And my son's already been away from home for training and deployments multiple times. We had a moment, too, that I'll always cherish on the day of my son's commissioning. My father, who had long since been retired, he put on his uniform, and the 3 of us went down to Nichols Hall at Auburn University to visit the Hall of Generals, where every general officer who had graduated from Auburn has their picture hanging. And the 3 of us, in uniform, stood next to my grandfather's picture, so that, in essence, I had 4 generations of my family in uniform in one picture together. 4 generations of service. 4 generations who didn't care a whit about what our post was named. 4 generations representing 85 years of continuous service to the country, and we didn't give one hoot about whether or not someone on high thought something about everything that had nothing to do with whether we would fight our nation's battles with honor and come home to our families. In the Army that my family came up through, we always saw stupid decisions from the flagpole as nothing more than stupid decisions from the flagpole. We have so much to be thankful for. At every turn in this country, we have more than what we need and much of what we want. We have freedoms, we have rights, we have security, we have so much. And the smallest and least equipped grocery store in the smallest town is better stocked than most of the shelves in the bazaars and markets around the world. The darkest alley in most U.S. cities is better than the main roads across much of the world. By and large, when we flip a switch, the lights come on, and when we turn the tap, clean water comes out. Generally speaking, we can say what we want, go where we want, worship how we want, and associate with whomever we want, but this is not by chance. This is not because of virtue-signaling politicians or hand-wringing pundits. The freedoms and prosperity that we know as a nation are made possible because of the lives of so many who put on our nation's uniforms and went to hard places to do hard things, all of whom came home changed, many of whom never came home at all. And we are free and we are kept free because of good people who went to great lengths to go to dangerous things and do them for you. And it's time that we get back to that mentality. What we're watching right now with the renaming of Fort Bragg back to Fort Bragg, it just feels right. It's like finding out that something you always believed in was actually what you knew it to be. As if some larger force just provided that kind of hand-on-the-shoulder assurance that we were actually right all along. And I believe that we're going to see more of this. And I believe that soldiers will respond. And we will get back to training young men and women to defeat and deter the enemies of this country. And we will tell those young men and women, that treasure of ours, we will tell them that if they will join the big green machine, that they will do more and see more and be more than they could ever have been. And it'll be bigger than them. It'll be why they will one day be the old guy wearing the veteran hat, saluting the flag, telling the stories, because they're proud to have done something. And many of them will now answer the question again, hey, where'd you serve? And they'll say, me? I was at Bragg.